Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nathan back with another video for you today. And today we got the next episode of Power Surge, our 2025 NFL Power Rankings. Today we're going to be talking about the 27th ranked New York Giants. Now, unfortunately, the Giants are a team that I actually want to root for, a team I do believe in. However, there is several reasons why I have them down this low. But before we go ahead and get into that, please go ahead and drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Stick around. We got a lot of content coming to you this NFL season. But let's go ahead and get straight into it. So first of all, we're going to be talking about their 2024 season. In order to know where we're going, I think it's very, very important to contextualize last season for us to really understand why we're in the position we're in the first place. So they ended up going 3-14 overall, while going 5-12 against the spread. So on paper, not great, but in actuality, they started the season, I think, more competitive than maybe they'll get credit for. They had three one-score losses to division rivals, so twice to Washington and once to Dallas. They were in a somewhat close primetime game against the Bengals, where they lost 17-3 or 17-7, and then they lost in overtime to the Panthers. So I mean, I do think this team had more competitive juice in them than they'll really get credit for. But they still were not a perfect team. Part of the reason why is the offensive side of the ball. 31st in points per game, 30th in yards per game. If you're not moving the ball or getting it into the end zone, you're not going to be a very good football team. And unfortunately, they found that out the hard way. And that ultimately ended up having Daniel Jones get released because of that. They decided that they were going to bench him, and he said, "Why don't you just cut me?" So they did. So they say goodbye to Daniel Jones. And even after he left, it really didn't solve all of their offensive problems. However, their defense was pretty solid. I mean, they were still below average, but I think better than their numbers indicate. 21st in points per game, 24th in yards per game. It's the same thing we've seen in a lot of these teams we've discussed so far, where their offense was so bad that it ultimately hurt the defense. And so I do think the New York Giants were a victim of this as well last season. But the good thing is they did get some solid contributions from young players. So Tyron Tracy, Malik Neighbors are just two to name an example of. They did get solid output from those guys. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter because now Brian Daboll is on the hot seat, and so he is definitely coaching for his NFL job. So let's go ahead and talk about their offseason now and see what they did to fix this roster. So, starting on the offensive side, they decided let's throw some darts and try to get at least some solid play in. Dart, no pun intended there, with Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, and Jameis Winston. They also brought in Cam Scatabo, who I'm honestly a huge fan of, as well as Zach Pascal and James Hudson, who, I mean, are really just kind of more depth pieces than anything. And all they really say goodbye to is Daniel Jones, whom they cut in the middle of last season, Drew Lock, who wasn't very good for them, and Chris Hubbard, who's kind of just a rotational offensive lineman. So ultimately, on the offense, you are expecting to get better. I know Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, and Jameis Winston is definitely not some sort of elite quarterback room. Far from it, really. But I do think they did a better job of bringing in someone right now to give them a solid floor on Russell Wilson. Someone in Jameis Winston who could kind of be a fire starter and kind of give this team a little bit of jolt of energy if Russell Wilson isn't playing well. And then Jackson Dart, who you're hoping can kind of turn into your franchise guy if you're Brian Daboll and able to keep your job. So I do think it's a pretty solid offseason. And I do think Cam Scatabo is a really great runner. And honestly, I think he's kind of underrated in the draft process for how good of a player I think he actually is. And so I do think he's ultimately going to end up getting some solid production here. Maybe not immediately, but definitely at some point down the road. And then on the defense, they bring in Darius Alexander, Roy Robertson Harris, and Jeremiah Ledbetter in the interior group. Abdul Carter, Chauncey Golston, and Victor Dumakije on the edge, as well as bringing Chris Board, Paul Devo, and Javon Holland. So they really brought in some solid pieces to improve what was already not a really horrible defense. And they're only saying goodbye to Aziz Ojulari, Dory Jackson, and Jason Pinnock. So you're not upset with anybody you're losing, and you're hoping with spending your first round pick on Abdul Carter and bringing in Paul Devo and Javon Holland that you're not only increasing the floor but the ceiling of what is probably going to be a pretty solid defensive group. So overall, when we talk about this offseason, the main thing they did, I think that's really going to determine the outlook of this team, is they decided to keep Brian Daboll and the coaching staff the same. I personally believe in Brian Daboll and this coaching staff. I do think they can figure it out, but it's really going to depend on kind of what happens in this quarterback room. I do think they did a really excellent job, at least process wise, of trying to rebuild this quarterback room, but it's still not perfect, and there is still some things you're worried about. But overall, I do think they brought in significant talent increases. And honestly, they just upgraded basically in every position group across the board. So you're expecting this team should only get better. So now, as we start talking about this offense, this is still the group that I have some more worries about. And we'll just start off at quarterback with Russell Wilson. So I do think you're really hoping to get kind of just solid baseline quarterback play, which you weren't getting at all from anybody who played last year. So you're hoping that he's going to come in and at least be a solid quarterback. And last year, I mean, they were 6-5 when Russell Wilson played in Pittsburgh, and their losses weren't even bad teams. So as a starter, Russell Wilson, I mean, they lost to Philadelphia and Baltimore on the road, and then Kansas City and Cincinnati at home. So I mean, losing to four of the best teams in the NFL out of your five losses, I'm definitely not mad at. So I mean, if he can come in and give you solid quarterback play, that should just overall increase the entire floor for this team in general. And then, drafting Jackson Dart, I definitely think has some flaws in his game. I do think he has a good playmaking instinct, but he's definitely prone to make some mistakes. So hopefully, sitting down and kind of learning how to grow into more of a pro caliber quarterback, as opposed to Ole Miss, which was a little bit more of a gimmick offense, I do think will ultimately be best for his career. And then Jameis Winston, as I said, I think he can really come in and kind of light a fuse under this team. So if the offense is still not very explosive, I think throwing Jameis Winston out there for a couple starts to kind of just throw the ball around, kind of like 7-on-7 and put up some points, I really do think could potentially save Brian Daboll his job at some point. Now, when we kind of start talking about the playmaking group, first off, we got to start with Malik Neighbors. I think he is just the next in line for these elite wide receivers coming out of LSU. I mean, he is a true number one wide receiver, great after the catch, great ball skills, can win to all levels. Like, I think he just is one of already a top 10 wide receiver in this league. I know a lot of people are going to say, kind of pump the brakes, but I believe what I saw. I think he's a fantastic player and just a piece that's going to be a cornerstone of this franchise for years to come. The issue is, besides him, you're kind of lacking explosive talent. So your wide receiver group is, in particular, pretty weak outside of Neighbors. Darius Slayton is a good wide receiver, but he's kind of just a deep threat, which hasn't been unlocked under Daniel Jones and some of these other quarterbacks. So hopefully, bringing in Russ, who is still excellent at throwing the deep ball, can actually turn Darius Slayton into a much better threat going forward. Wan'Dale Robinson, I do think probably won't be as productive. Russell Wilson at his peak was not really known for his like slicing apart of defenses and playing excellently in structure. What really made Russell Wilson great in his prime was his kind of ability to improvise and play make and elevate the offense through kind of using his legs and scrambling and finding the open guys in scramble drill. So I do think Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to be kind of a dink and dunk slot option, I do think he's going to struggle really getting a lot of those kind of easy design touches or checkdowns that I think Russ just kind of naturally misses sometimes and naturally tries to do more than. And then Jalen Hyatt, just kind of a low and deep threat. Not really expecting much from him at this point. I think he was pretty overdrafted when he was drafted in the first place. So expecting him to have some sort of breakout at this point, it's not really likely, but maybe with Russ coming in there, he'll at least be somewhat useful, like he hasn't been the last couple seasons. And then the tight end group is also pretty weak. I mean, Theo Johnson's a good athlete, but I mean, he's nowhere close to being any sort of excellent tight end or like true receiving threat. And then Daniel Bellinger is kind of just a very basic vanilla tight end who's kind of just replacement level below average. And then Chris Manhertz, kind of just a blocker at this point. Are you getting anything from him in the passing game? Not really. I do think this could be a pretty decent running back room. I do think that Tyrone Tracy is definitely going to start. However, as a former, wide receiver that was converted to running back, I do think he has good receiving back upside. However, as a true runner of the ball, I do ultimately think he's going to lose out to Cam Scatabo. Cam Scatabo is just a dog, dude. I mean, he's an excellent runner. He was uber productive at Arizona State. I mean, if you watch that Texas game last year in the playoffs, I mean, he took that game over. So having one of these guys who can just completely take over a game, especially at running back of all positions, I really do think could help give this Giants offense a much safer floor than what they had. Because, I mean, we saw their floor is bottom three offense already. So probably bringing in Cam Scatabo and Russell Wilson will at least give you, a bottom 10 floor offense, which, is still not great. But we'll talk about the defense and see why that may not matter. But ultimately, I think a lot of this offense in general is going to hinge on Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas is one of the best tackles in the league when he is healthy. However, he is never healthy. I mean, he's missed games every single season of his career, and not even just like one or two, like at least 4 to 6 to 8 games. Like he misses a significant amount of time every single season. The one year that he played every single game, they made it to the playoffs. Funny trend there if you really pay attention. So ultimately, when he's out there, you really don't need to worry about Andrew Thomas. The issue is just if and when he will be out there. Because at this point, I just really don't think you can bank on him having a healthy season. I mean, you're injury prone until you're not, but I'm not going to believe in Andrew Thomas staying healthy anytime soon. And then the rest of this group is kind of just okay guys. So if Andrew Thomas goes down, I think this group is going to start looking pretty thin. But if Andrew Thomas is there, I think they're all going to fall in line and be solid players. John Runyon and Greg Van Roten is a very just okay base level starting guard combo. And then John Michael Schmitz as your center, hoping that maybe he can kind of develop into kind of the mid round steal that a lot of people kind of thought he would be in the draft community. And then Jermaine Illuminor really developed in Las Vegas into a pretty solid, tackle. Not, elite or anything like that, but definitely above average, solid tackle to where you don't have to worry about. The issue is depth wise, you're looking a little scarce, frankly. So James Hudson is going to be your next guy in, if and when Andrew Thomas goes down. But if anybody else goes down, I mean, Evan Neal, Aaron Stinnie, like they're not very good players. So if you start getting injuries on this offensive line, your offensive line is going to start looking real rough real quick. If your offensive line starts looking bad, then I think there's really potential for this offense to shit the bed again, unfortunately. The good thing is you may not even need to worry about how bad your offense is because this defense has elite potential, and this all starts on the defensive line, which could turn into an absolutely elite defensive line. And all going to start with your boy, Sexy Dexy, Dexter Lawrence. He is one of the best pure players in the NFL. He is an absolute impossible to move in the run game. He's like a true elite throwback nose tackle. However, he can also get after the quarterback at one of the highest rates of the interior. So he's not quite the threat that Aaron Donald was getting after the quarterback. Because, Aaron Donald was completely unblockable, and that's what made him the best pass rushing interior defender of all time. But Sexy Dexy is one of the best run stoppers in the league as a whole, and he can still get after the quarterback at like a 85-90% of what Aaron Donald did. I mean, so that truly makes him pound for pound one of the best players in the entire league. And I'm of the growing opinion that your defensive interior is more valuable than your edge group. Like, I'd rather have an elite, sexy Dexy than I would like a Micah Parsons or a Myles Garrett. Because if you can blow things up from the inside and the quarterback has to face that pressure all right on top of him, I do think most quarterbacks, it hurts them more than edge defenders. Like edge defenders, you can run away from them or you can step up in the pocket and avoid them. But if your center is getting blown off the ball, then you just cannot do as much as an offense as you want. And so I think Dexter Lawrence can really help just absolutely decimate defensive lines. And unlike a lot of defensive linemen on the interior, I mean, he could truly be a three down defensive lineman and be out there almost every single play. And that's just not really something that you can expect from most interior pieces. So he is an absolute stud. And just with him alone, I think you have a top 10 unit. Where you can kind of start talking about elite, like top 2 to 3 defensive line, is this edge group. Brian Burns is definitely like a tier 2 edge rusher. He's not in that tier 1 of elite guys, but he is still an excellent edge rusher, pass rusher to be more specific. And when you have Dexter Lawrence at the inside, who's going to be demanding double teams, and you have to defend him one on one, that is terrifying. Even more terrifying when you have the combo of Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter on the other side. So, I mean, this is already probably going to be one of the most athletic edge trios really in the league. I do think Kayvon Thibodeau has not developed kind of how you wanted him to. There were some character concerns for him coming out of college, and I do think he has kind of lived up to those concerns. So that's why you're hoping in bringing Abdul Carter, who could be what you were hoping Kayvon Thibodeau could be, is really going to help. Abdul Carter, from what I'm seeing, is like the new generation of Von Miller. He's incredibly fast. I mean, he absolutely teleports. Like, he is insane how quick he moves. But I think, really, most importantly, and something that I've noticed, is his football IQ, I think, is extremely, extremely high. And from all accounts, seems like he's a good dude. So if you have a guy who is going to be able to get for the quarterback, is an absolutely insane athlete, and actually kind of understands what he's doing, I mean, I think you have the potential to have the absolute best pass rush in the league between Burns, Carter, and Dexter Lawrence. Like, it's just really, really going to be hard to have to stop this group. And then Chauncey Golston, as kind of a rotational fourth piece, is a very solid, okay pass rusher in his own regard. Your interior unit is a little bit weaker, but Darius Alexander could give you solid pass rush from the inside as a rookie. And then Roy Robertson Harris and Raheem Nunez Roches can play some early down run defense and hold their owns and not really be issues. And same thing with Elijah Chapman. So between you know all the pieces on this defensive line, like, you are potentially looking at one of the best defensive lines in the league, like a true like top 3 unit. If Abdul Carter ends up hitting and Dexter Lawrence stays healthy. Then when you kind of start talking about your linebacking group, Bobby Okereke is just one of the true, like, solid, good linebackers in the league. He defends the pass. He's a solid coverage linebacker, solid run defender, kind of just a good, solid, good at everything linebacker. And so I think he kind of helps round out a decent front seven. And then with Micah McFadden, Chris Board, and Darius Musau, I do think you have some solid depth there. Micah McFadden's got good speed and is definitely a good run defender, but does have some laps in pass coverage. But even Abdul Carter did some interesting things dropping back into coverage at Penn State. So I do think he is capable of playing more kind of interior linebacker if Kayvon Thibodeau is out there. And so if you have to try to block Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, and Dexter Lawrence at all time, shit, even Darius Alexander at one time, that could be an absolute scary defensive line to have to face, because like everybody's gonna have to be one on one, or you're gonna have like 7 guys protect. So I mean, there is some fun things that this front seven really has the potential to do. Hopefully, also as well, with how good that front seven is, your secondary is going to be able to play much better. The first thing that's going to help is bringing in Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, which will vastly improve the floor of the secondary. I think they saw what Xavier McKinney did in Green Bay last year, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should have just re-signed him. So they went out and got the next best safety on the market. Javon Holland is a stud in his own right. I don't think he's quite like a superstar elite safety, but definitely kind of that kind of star tier 2 of safeties, and an absolute beast, and definitely the best member of this secondary. And then Paulson Adebo, a very fun, aggressive corner, probably in an ideal world, probably your second corner in an ideal world, but definitely a very good corner in his own right. And I mean, theoretically, with how good this defensive line could be, is in store for probably a good season. I mean, if you're able to just cover for a little bit and that defensive line can get after people, I do think he has the ability to produce very well here. And then hopefully with Paulson Adebo and uh, Javon Holland in here, you won't have to rely on Deontay Banks quite as much. He has had some kind of technical mishaps early in his career and hasn't quite figured it out. but hopefully not having to be kind of the guy in the secondary while also having a really good pass rush should only help him, I'd imagine. And then Drew Phillips is a very, very solid slot cornerback that they found here. So at least your cornerback and safety group, you're not terribly worried about. And then Trey Hawkins and Cordell Flott is some decent young depth. And then Tyler Nubin has really broken out and been a stud. One of the best, I think, kind of run defending safeties in the game. So while Javon Holland can kind of take more of the coverage assignments, Tyler Nubin can definitely be a threat inside the box. And then Dane Belton is overall solid depth. So you do have the potential to have an elite defense, and that could really save this team and Brian Daboll's job if they're as good as we kind of think they may be able to be. Now I'm going to welcome you to the Fantasy Control Room. This is where we begin speaking all things fantasy football. First off, we're going to talk about Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is currently going at wide receiver 6. I think that's great value kind of at the end of the first round there because, I mean, he had an absolute insane target share last year. He led the league in targets as a rookie. Like they were just absolutely peppering the dude this ball because I mean he's truly going to be one of the best wide receivers in the league. Like I think there's no doubt about it. So not only does he already have an insane target share, but he only had 5 touchdowns last year and still produced. So if he gets some positive touchdown regression with hopefully better quarterback play, I mean I think there's a legit shot where Malik Neighbors finishes as wide receiver 1. Now between CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, I'm not going to bank on that per se, but I definitely do think there's a world where he is the wide receiver 1. So to me, he's probably my personal wide receiver 3, 4, or 5. I think between him, Justin Jefferson, and Puka Nacua, they all kind of have their own questions in the quarterback room. So where you could kind of rank those three kind of any way you like, and I wouldn't really be too mad at it. So I think at wide receiver 6, I think is tremendous value and definitely someone who I'm okay with drafting at the end of the first round, and especially the second round if he happens to drop. Now, as we talk about Tyrone Tracy, I'm a little bit more hesitant about him. Currently, he's being drafted at RB29, but I think I'd let someone else take. I do think he's ultimately going to start losing touches and probably his job overall to Cam Scatabo. He is a good player, but I do think as an actual running back, still has some more to kind of learn. Um, and so I do think Cam Scatabo is a more natural runner of the ball, is going to take his job, um, at least the early down and goal line work. And so I do think Tyrone Tracy has the upside of a good receiving running back. But at running back, you need volume to be fantasy relevant, not just targets. It's almost kind of like the whole Najee Harris, Jalen Warren thing, where Jalen Warren's never quite been as good as people wanted him to be, because receiving backs is not how you get value. Having 3 catches for 30 yards, 8 carries just doesn't lead to fantasy relevance ever. So ultimately, Tyron Tracy is someone else's problem, at least in my opinion, not someone I'm taking in any of my drafts. And next up, so look, this entire quarterback room, completely avoiding, not touching it. I think the upside is pretty low. But if James Winston comes in there, I think he could have a couple fun weeks coming in and absolutely lighting up the scoreboard. But definitely don't draft him because there's also a chance he doesn't even play. So not touching that room at all. Cam Scatabo, though, at RB34, I definitely is someone I would target. I do think he's going to have great value late in the season if he kind of starts taking snaps away from Tyron Tracy. So definitely someone who I'm very okay with drafting late in the draft, especially if you go wide receiver heavy or if you kind of have some good running backs in place to where you're not relying on him to play immediately. But no one else on this offense I'm really touching. Darius Slayton, I believe, just don't draft deep threats in fantasy football. And Wandale Robinson is just a very low end slot guy. He's not getting crazy yards, not getting crazy touchdowns. So I don't know if his 8 catches for 40 yards is really going to lead to you winning a whole lot of games. So staying away from Wandale Robinson and Theo Johnson, even as how weak this tight end group really is, and nowadays NFL landscape still does not touch on Theo Johnson. Maybe if there start being injuries, there'll be some value late in the season, but definitely not worth drafting or rostering until you start kind of having some of those injuries down the line. Now, as we get to the schedule, this is where everything I just said in the video so far doesn't matter anymore because this schedule is an absolute gauntlet. For a team that finished last in their division and their coach is on the hot seat, This is such an unfair schedule. Who in the NFL hates Brian Daboll so much where they're trying to get him fired? Because what is this? So you open the season going to the road back to back weeks to your division rivals in the Commanders and Cowboys. And then you get rewarded by getting to come home to play Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and then Jim Harbaugh and his LA Chargers. No way you're taking any of those games to start off the season. And then you finally get a winnable game, but even then, that is on the road in New Orleans, and then you get to come home and play the Philadelphia reigning Super Bowl champion Eagles, and then you get to go back on the road to Denver. Oh, and then the Eagles again. And then finally, you get to end the first half of the schedule cleansing your palate with the San Francisco 49ers, who are probably going to be good again this year. So that's just 8 losses, I think, no matter what way you cut it. And then finally, your schedule lightens up where you get to go on the road to Chicago and then play the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. Wow, you are absolutely screwed here. And then you get another one of your more winnable games, I guess, having to go to the Patriots, but going to play the Patriots kind of, in November. Probably not going to be a very, very, very fun game. Oh, hey, and then you get to go on by, kind of relax after 13 grueling weeks and maybe 13 grueling losses. And then when you come off a bye, you get your division rival Washington Commanders again. And then you get the Minnesota Vikings, who just won 14 games last year. And then you have to go on the road to Pete Carroll's Raiders and finish the season against the Cowboys. So I don't know who in the league office Brian Daboll pissed off, but as a man who's trying to save your job, dude, honestly, just quit before they fire you. Just don't even let them have the chance because there is no way you're saving your job with this team unless Russell Wilson is really able to work wonders on this offense and this defense does turn out to be elite. Because, I mean, Kansas City, the Chargers, Denver, San Francisco, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota. Like your most winnable games is going to be New Orleans, Chicago, the Patriots, and the Raiders. And even then, none of those are home games. So, I mean, it's just absolutely brutal. I mean, this team has the over under at 5.5. I mean, there's a world where maybe they win 6 games. Like, I think that's if everything works out. But I mean, their floor is legit like 2 wins. And that's the thing where it really sucks for the Giants because I do think this is a good team. But when you have just 15 weeks against some of the best teams in the league, I don't care who you are, you're probably just going to struggle a little bit. Like, unless you have a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, you're just not going to come out of these games with victories. And it's just really unfair to the Giants, Brian Daboll, and Giants fans that this is your schedule. So now when we talk about the cover story, where we start going over all things sports betting, I mean, division odds, they are plus 3,000 odds to win their division. And there's a reason why, because that is a ridiculous schedule. Plus 800 odds to make the playoffs and plus 20,000 odds to win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, I want to go over on them. With my brain, I cannot. Division winner, there is no chance they win their division. Playoff, Super Bowl, definitely not. If you're betting on them to win the Super Bowl, might as well just send me the $5 or however much you're going to put on there, because at least you're helping somebody out instead of Vegas and all the bookies there. I do think, however, there is some value in the player prop mark. Malik Neighbors over 7.5 touchdowns and over 1,174.5 yards. I do think he's going to be able to produce much more consistently than he was last year with better quarterback play. And even then, he had 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns while missing a couple games. So they're going to keep peppering the ball. He's only going to produce and produce. Tyrone Tracy, I am taking his under at 724.5 rushing yards. As I said, I do think Cam Scatabo is ultimately going to start stealing a lot of his touches. So I'm not expecting a great season from Tracy there. I do think Wilson, we're probably talking under 9.5 games started. I mean, you look how difficult this schedule is. I think this is going to be a team that starts getting desperate. So I do think we're going to see Jameis, and I do think we're going to see Jackson Dart. So unless Russell Wilson is able to dial back the clock to like 2018 Russ, I do think that eventually they're just going to pull the plug on him and say, you know what, let's give one of these other guys a chance. Cam Scatabo, I will say over 4.5 rushing touchdowns. I do think he's going to end up being kind of a goal line vulture for this team. It could be Devin Singletary, but I do just think Cam Scatabo is that good of a running back. And then Brian Daboll being the first coach fired at plus 425 odds. I think it's really between him and Kevin Stefanski. Both of them have absolutely horrendous schedules to start off with, so it's going to be one of them. But I mean, if it's a 50-50 at plus 425 odds, I'm taking that value there. So now, as we get to the Scorch report, this is where we give the hottest takes of the NFL season, and we're going to be talking about Brian Daboll and not how he's a bad head coach. Actually, the opposite. Honestly, I don't think the media is going to give him this amount of credit or any sort of backing, but I mean, this guy won a playoff game with Daniel fucking Jones. Like, I think Brian Daboll is a legit good head coach. I don't think he's lost the locker room yet. I do think this team believes in him. Ultimately, I think he's just had a bad string of luck. I think deciding to stick by Daniel Jones is ultimately going to be his downfall. And I do think he's probably going to have to at least take 1 year off of coaching, and then maybe he can get an offensive coordinator job and work his way back to head coach. But I do think he actually has the potential to be a top half coach in the league, or at least a top, half offensive mind. Fortunately, the New York Giants are cursed, and he fell victim to that curse. But I do think that we will not give Brian Daboll enough credit as an offensive play caller in mind and a head coach, as I think he kind of deserves. I mean, granted, he has lost a lot of games, but I mean, Kevin Stefanski has 2 Coach of the Years, and I would rather have Brian Daboll than Kevin Stefanski. So do with that information as you will, but I do think Brian Daboll is one of the top half coaches in the entire football league. And with that being said, that is my opinion on these New York Football Giants. Go ahead and drop a like and comment down below. Am I too high? Am I foolish for having any sort of belief in this team? Go ahead, let me know. Like and subscribe. We got a lot of content coming to you this season. Season is about 3 weeks away, so I'm super, super excited to get started. I've done like 600 fantasy drafts, so I'm really ready to see my teams in action. But yeah, stick around. We got a lot of videos coming for you soon. Peace.